Alex Welburn, TrainSharp, thank you very much indeed for giving us your time this evening. So thanks ever so much for coming along. So first of all, just for anybody who doesn't know who you are and they've been hiding under a rock somewhere, just tell us a little about, pen portrait of yourself.
Yeah, so my name's Alex Welburn. I'm a performance physiologist here at TrainSharp, and I'm also one of the talent development coaches here as well. So that's pretty much me. And I do race bikes as well. So I do enjoy partaking a bit of road, bit of mountain biking, and an avid coffee lover as well.
So hold up a second. When you say a bit, you have represented Great Britain.
Yeah, I don't. I've enjoyed my time on the bike and been proud to put that, the GB jersey on a few times, on a variety of disciplines. And then, I still race and still absolutely enjoy it.
That's fantastic. That's good. So coffee, just a quick one though. What size coffee do you drink?
Size coffee, it's always a double, 18 grams, 25 seconds extraction time.
Yeah, you're a proper coffee drinker. God almighty.
Well, the fact is, down here there's so many fantastic local roasters. So I like to, I like to try and stay as local as I can. Yeah, you can't beat local coffee, really. Well, roasted local coffee, anyway.
This is cycling, obviously, so I might as well mention it. So just before lockdown, by accident, we bought a bean to cup coffee machine, and it's probably the best thing I have ever bought. It's just fantastic.
It is. It's when you go to a cafe and you realise I can have a nicer cup of coffee at home, and you go.
You become a real coffee snub, didn't you? But I just, what I miss. This is the only thing I miss about lockdown, really, is drinking a really, really good coffee somewhere, cycling, and then a good piece of cake. And that's
a good piece of cake. Yeah, I miss the social side of the cafe rides as well. We've got quite a few good group rides around here, and you can do tour of the cafes, really, which is really quite nice. Apart from some of them like to stop halfway through, I much prefer to do 3/4 of my ride first and then stop for a coffee, because then
I'm like myself. I prefer that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then it becomes, let's say, a 3-hour ride and then 45 minutes rather than 2 2-hour rides. Really, that's how I like to view it.
Well, it's great living in a village where there's 3 cycling cafes, so you can do a ride, stop at the cafe, and then 2 minutes home. Or on the last one I did one with Lichfield. I must say, I did one with Lichfield. They'll probably send me complaints now. And one guy's chain snapped, so it was really lucky. Nobody had tools, as normal. So what was lucky, I was able to ride home, get my chain tool, ride back, and then sort him out. So that ended up longer than I thought it was going to be. Anyway, that's the one. Right. So, a lot of the people, we obviously Titanium Geek for the background, people who don't know, originally when James did it, we did the very first Zwift manual, and he was a nut on Zwift when it was in beta. I've met James on beta on Zwift, and got addicted to training indoors, really, which isn't healthy. And people like Professor Andy Lane tell me I need to go out more and into the greenery and all that sort of stuff. And then it's been really interesting because we're at a point where there was a few sort of geeky people like me that are riding indoors and enjoying it and racing and stuff like that. And it wasn't masses. Then, of course, there's great social experiments occurred called the pandemic, and the whole flipping world's been on turbo trainers, including people we've just been talking about before in recording who were in the 70s, who hadn't even got a mobile phone or an iPad. And now I've got an iPad and a Elite Dorito, and he races probably 3 times a week on Zwift. So, it's just unbelievable the change it's made. So from what people have been doing now, what have you noticed? What's changed in people's training and performance and the sort of data that professional coaches like you see?
So, I mean, in all honesty, not a massive amount has changed, because we integrate indoor training as part of it. And obviously the system that we use, obviously today's plan, integrates with Zwift, so it will push the session to Zwift. So it just makes the whole experience a lot easier. You hop on, turn your laptop on, and you get going with it. So from that perspective, there isn't a huge amount that has changed. Normally when I'm at work, I use Zwift myself, as it just makes things just easier than staring at a brick wall, really. The problem more occurs when you transition between the kind of the phases of periodization and trying to hold back individuals who, let's say, have particular goals across the season but want to get involved within Zwift racing. So it's also about balancing the training, the intensity, and the volume appropriately to ensure we are still kind of getting optimal progression. It's more of a case of making sure someone just doesn't constantly cane themselves. And then, let's say they cane themselves during December and January, they often put themselves in a little bit more of a hole. So it's just kind of using it in the most appropriate way for that individual. So some people, use it for the longer efforts, because they don't, it's, a bit harder to have that motivation side of things when they just want to go out and we're doing a 40-minute threshold effort, a 40-minute sweet spot effort, zone 3, whatever it might be. And actually they partake in the Teen Time Trial series. So actually the efforts are a little bit smoother, and it is more representative of what we are looking for out of that session. So it's all about trying to integrate it within that individual and their individual needs. So it's a tool like anything, and as long as you use it appropriately, you can get some fantastic uses out of it.
So what about so if somebody did 5 Zwift races a week,
mm-hmm.
what's the likely impact of that if they then become an outdoor cyclist?
Well, they'll find they'll have quite a bit of speed from doing those 5 Zwift races, but obviously cycling is an aerobic sport, so they are more than likely going to lack that endurance at a certain point. So if they want to be performing at the end of 3-4 hours, that you need to put in that endurance work. And obviously you need to complement intensity with volume and making sure those easy rides are easy and those hard rides are hard. So it's all about balance. And then it depends on the individual. What are their actual goals? If they just want to enjoy Zwift racing and smash it out, then they'll be able to do that for a while, but they'll have to take adequate rest, because we can only improve as much as we can recover. So there's no point training harder than we can recover, because then you'll start to plateau. You kind of go past functional overreach into non-functional overreach, and then just put yourself in a bit of a hole, to be honest. And obviously if you want to enjoy it, you want to be performing well. So it's just striking that balance in between the two.
So if you've got people that are, they're not, let's say they've got a power meter, obviously, because we've got a power meter, you have to for Zwift. That was an interesting one, wasn't it? We sort of, those of them, particularly people like me, were resisting power meters. You have to have one now, and you've got several. So you've got power meters, and you've got a heart rate monitor, and some people don't wear them. That's another crazy thing. But anyway, you've got all this data that's knocking about, and they're not engaging with professional coaches like you. How can they spot when that data that they're producing is indicating to them that they're overreaching?
To be honest, the first thing really is look at those subjective measures. You should know in yourself if you're not performing. You start to have that negative association with that session. The effort will feel harder to kind of hit those higher heart rates, that 80 to 90% of the maximal heart rate. It will feel harder. So there is actually a sub-threshold test that individuals can do. It's called the Lambert's Maximal Cycling Test, where you look at the RPE of a session. So it's 6 minutes, 6 minutes, 3 minutes at 60%, 80%, and 90% of max heart rate. You then fix on the heart rate, so it needs to be plus or minus within a beat of that. And then you look at the power differences between that. And you also associate that with RPE. And then afterwards, once you finish that final 3 minutes, you stop for 90 seconds and you record your heart rate recovery rate. So using all those variables together can give you a bit more of an understanding. There's quite a bit of literature on it, and it's quite an interesting way, because you can use it as part of your warm-up in your session as well. So it integrates quite nicely. And that's kind of more getting into the complicated side of things. And it's better you can have a coach like me that can understand the data a bit more and kind of feed back as well from an objective measure, because I'm not that individual. But you should, to be honest, you'll feel it, and you'll start to see a decline in race results relatively quickly, and things will just feel harder. Don't question, you need to understand how you feel as well. That, you don't need an app or any gizmo or anything to that. Actually, do you know what? Today was hard. And then the next day will be hard. And if you start to see that pattern, you might go, okay, maybe I need a bit of rest or some just steady riding in between to give you a better idea of how you're feeling.
What should be, so for example, there's a lot of talk about polarized training at the moment.
Yes.
So, I just know how hard it is when you're riding indoors and you're on Zwift, or I ride on, to be fair, I ride on RGT more than anything at the moment. But anyway, so several other platforms. But let's say I'm on RGT or Zwift, particularly Zwift, and somebody speeds past me, and I'm out for an easy ride. So I think I'm not having this. So you ride onto the back of them, and you might recognize somebody, and you're sitting on the back of them. And the next minute you're in a burn up, and and you climb off your bike. You go, that was amazing. I meant to do an hour and a half really easy, but I did an hour, and I'm knackered. That's fantastic, and it also justifies a cake, which is another bonus. Which is that relationship between cyclists and food, which is always a tenuous one.
I mean, everyone surely knows that once you finish your ride, you've got a 30-minute window where you can eat everything and the calories don't exist.
Yeah, I've been to that lecture. I've been to that lecture in Barton under Needwood. But that's what should people resist doing, and what should they do to get to enable them to recover and that get super overcompensation and all that sort of stuff?
To be honest, it's simply just managing recovery and ensuring when you are doing an easy ride, keep it easy. But if it does turn into a burnout, this is where training can be adaptive. And having a coach, let's say, can read those signals and adjust the training appropriately. So let's say you had a burn up and it was meant to be recovery, then you might shift the days around. You just kind of adapt, and things get in way in life, and you might find yourself with a little extra more time, or today you're feeling good so you want to do it, but the next day you might be feeling it a little bit. Maybe swap the sessions around. Just you don't have to be absolutely fixed to a T. Training is meant to be adaptive in its very nature, because you give it a stimulus, a stress, and you respond from that. And you just kind of keep changing things around to make sure they suit you and your lifestyle. This is what a lot of people do enjoy about coaches. You drop them a message, you send them an email, send a pigeon, whatever, whatever method you want to do to get hold of them. And this is why it's my full-time job. So I have athletes, constantly through the day. Life gets in the way, work gets called, they want to spend a bit of time with the family, or serious racing. They've got a lot more time now because it's the school holidays. Let's adjust the training. You always need to be adaptive. You don't have to be absolutely fixed to a plan. You can always adapt. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's good to know. I mean, because I suppose people get, I've done it myself, you get quite religious doing this. If you're following a off-the-shelf training plan, you get the off-the-shelf training plan, you follow it, and if you don't do a session to the plan, you feel that the end goal isn't going to be achievable because you've not followed the sort of like those steps, which is for example, I'm just thinking about when I was training for marathons. You'd have a 12-week plan that you got from an advanced marathoning book, and you had a cold for 3 days, so you wouldn't train. And I'd feel that my whole training had fallen apart, and I'd then got to somehow make up on those 3 days. So, yeah, I suppose the benefit of dealing with TrainSharp, I take it, is I'd just phone you up and say, Alex, I've had a cold. I don't feel I can train for 3 days. What the hell do I do?
Yeah, exactly. And I'd much rather an athlete comes to me and say, look, I'm feeling down, I'm feeling tired, can we adjust the plan? I would respect that far more than an athlete going, let's say, to prove it to themselves, then suffer through a session, because we need it to be productive at the end of the day. We want to create the right physiological stress. And if you're ill, you need to respect that stress and recover from it. I'd much rather an athlete, they're cold, just take 3-4 days off, whatever, we'll ease back into the training. And actually, if we take a step back from taking a week, 2, 3, 4 week view on it, you'll be far more productive in terms of your training response rather than fighting through it, because then you might feel kind of flaky for about 2 weeks or so, rather than just 3-4 days off, 2 days of just getting back into the rhythm, and then we get back onto it. That's the idea of where a coach gets far more involved into it, and then you trust that coach as well. So you go, right, I know this is what the coach has said. We've adapted it. I've spoken to it. It's a kind of a continuous kind of feedback loop. It's an ecosystem, really. Here at TrainSharp, we always encourage riders to have feedback. That's one of the most kind of strong points that you need to have with the coach, is that athlete to coach relationship, that feedback, that continual communication, because that coach needs to understand all the other things that's going on in your life to adapt it, because ultimately the training's got to fit around you. You shouldn't fit your life to fit the training fits around you. If you're full-time, that's fantastic, you've got all the hours, but if you're working 40 hours a week and your training time is precious, you want to make sure every session's counting, rather than just continuously putting yourself into a hole when you're getting ill. And if you continually get ill, that might then raise flags for that individual. Something else might be going on, so you can talk to that coach. We'll come up with ideas. Okay, what else could we do? Can we focus on sleep, nutrition? Are we fueling enough for our sessions? All those little things. It's someone, you can bounce ideas off and have that dialogue, really, to understand yourself better, because they'll take that objective view. They're not, you're, as a rider, you could be quite emotional within it. You're thinking all these things. Your mates are putting these, things in your head. You're trying to Google these solutions. When you start Googling stuff, we know that's when things can get a bit problematic, because your leg's probably going to fall off when you've got a cold. There's more on the extreme side of things, but it's just having that someone to understand that experience and that wealth of knowledge that goes with it, to go, no, it's okay, we get ill, that happens. We just try and make sure we don't get ill. We try and understand why we have got ill. So let's say if you're a teacher working in a school, there's likely lots of stuff going around. We're quite lucky at TrainSharp because we're quite relatively health conscious. There's not lots of people going in and out of the office. Obviously, we're in the lab and there's hygiene side of things. So getting ill is relatively rare for me, especially COVID, when we don't really see anyone as well. But it's just about understanding that individual really, more than anything, and then adapting.
Older athletes then. So what because I think one of the influences you tend to get is you see, don't you? You're looking at Cycling Weekly in the comic and stuff like that, and there's a lot of people will put example training programs in, and you see the training that all the young World Tour Pro riders are doing. You can see it all on Strava. But obviously, we talked earlier about context. So that was in the context of people in a certain situation with a different physiology, and let's say somewhere else on the distribution curve. But what's the lessons for older athletes? But what do they need to do, or we need to do with our training differently to what's the norm?
So I'm going to class older athletes here as over 35, because we know, generally speaking, that peak bone health, most aerobic performance markers and anaerobic performance markers decline after the age of 35. That's kind of understanding in terms of a decline of VO2 max. So obviously we understand these things. Obviously, critical power drop or critical speed in terms of running. There is muscle atrophy in type 2 muscle fiber types, which is more that kind of anaerobic capacity and anaerobic power. We know that declines, but obviously we know that in terms of physiology. But it's also looking at what the individual's goals are. We know in terms of Masters race performance that, let's say, take the Hawaii Ironman. I think I was reading the paper today that the average age for the peak top 10 went from 28 to 34. So obviously the limits of ultra endurance performance are pretty spectacular, and they do represent a unique area. But it depends on what that individual's goals are. So understanding that physiology, you want to reduce that decline as much as possible, and you also want to try and get them as fit as possible while understanding that. So obviously, if we know there's muscle dystrophy, the decline, reduction in it. If you don't use it, you lose it essentially. So you might want to incorporate a little bit more strength work. It's a bit more explosive work to try and reduce the impact of that decline. Integrate that into a little bit more of your training. Obviously, we know VO2 max declines, so you want to try and spend a bit of work on there a little bit more, and also respect recovery times as well. So generally speaking, your recovery times may increase. So it's that balance of all those other things that you should include to get the most out of yourself. So it's not necessarily different stuff. It's just doing the right amount of all these other things that you can possibly do. Obviously, as we get older, we tend to do things that we more prefer. And so, you go onto a club ride, and it's a perfect example. The juniors, the youth riders, they see a hill, they go. I remember being like that, and I wouldn't consider myself old yet, but I'm approaching that side of things, of that that 35 rather than that 15 side of things. And even I've seen it within changes in my training, and it's probably a bit more representative in terms of, obviously I've switched from mountain biking recently to the road side of things, and mountain biking focused a lot more on the short explosive efforts. That included a lot more of that in my training, and I was always that kind of 60 seconds to around that 6 minutes was always my strength point. Obviously with road, I've had to more focus on the endurance side of things, and I've tried to build that out. Unfortunately, I had a bit of a knee injury, which has cost me about 3 months, unfortunately. But I'm starting to build up that aerobic side of things. But I'm going to then, because I've built out that endurance, I'm then going to refocus back on the short, sharp stuff, because that has lacked because of the changes in training. But obviously, as youth riders, they'll continually smash it up, whereas, the older club riders don't like it. But is that a case because they don't want to, or they just don't do enough in their training? So it's just ensuring that balance is right for that individual. I've worked with quite a few massive athletes. We've put these practices in place, and we've seen fantastic results, even through a drop in training volume, just getting that perfect blend, really. Because often they can just have those junk miles where they kind of just have these mixed rides where it's not a solid zone 1, zone 2 ride. It's kind of zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, zone 5. It's a bit of everything. So obviously the adaptations from that can be a little bit more confusing for the body to understand. So it's just about understanding that individual, what their training goals are, and taking kind of the understanding of that physiology with that athlete forwards with the training program.
So where do you sit on polarized training?
I sit in terms of understanding the athlete first. I don't make the athlete fit the training program. I build a training program around the athlete. So if you look into the research, with especially around polarized training, people have got mixed opinions on how they define different zones. Obviously, you got your ventilatory thresholds. So you got VT1, VT2. and it's done the 3 zones. Obviously, then there's the lactate side of things as well, and LT1 and LT2. There's different definitions of your first turn point, so your lactate threshold. And it's just because it's describing a training intensity distribution doesn't necessarily also mean it's the correct one. And it's trying to understand the research on, while they are looking at these performance parameters, so let's say maximal aerobic power, threshold power, etc., etc. I could go on. There's a list of all things. We also need to understand that actually the best measure of performance is performance itself. So just because you are seeing these improvements in these markers doesn't necessarily mean performance will improve. So it's ensuring that we have the balance of everything and understanding that athlete to move forwards. So if an athlete, wants to come with me and wants to try Polarised, I'll try and understand that athlete a little bit more and understand of what weaknesses they have, because that'll need to build up, and what their demands of the event. So if you understand that, then you'll find the right training, and you might put shifts into it. And one of the key things is when you do your hard rides, keep them hard, but when you need to keep your easy rides easy. And that's often what people struggle with, especially on easy spins, recovery rides, educating the athletes that you need to go easy. It's not slow, it's easy. And I've been guilty of it, and of just going too hard on your easy rides. You click down the gears, you're going, all right, I'm feeling okay. But actually, I tried to give them targets to actually try and average the lowest heart rate possible and try and beat that next time. So I used to try, it used to be my recovery zone, let's say it was up to 120 beats. I was like, right, so I can go up to 120 beats. That's what I would see it as. But actually, I go, no, I try and keep it as low as I can. So I try and go up for 100 or even 99. It might be a 20k an hour average ride, but it's easy because you understand what is the purpose of recovery ride. It's just to spin the legs out. It's a feel good factor. You're not looking for a training adaptation for it, so you don't need to go hard.
That sounds like a brilliant excuse to go out and buy an e-bike.
We had some at work, and they are insane. I did enjoy it.
I've got one. I bought one off Matt Williams. I've got a Merida one, and it's a Merida mountain bike, and it's a different skill set, isn't it? Particularly when you're terrible off road like me. When you can do 25 kilometers an hour when you shouldn't be doing 25 kilometers an hour, it's good fun.
Yeah, the only thing I don't like they do tend to take a lot of my KOMs. I know I am precious about a couple, and it especially over Cannock Chase. I've still got a few over there, and I thought I had one the other week, and then I realised Lewis Askey had taken it. I was like, that's not too bad of a person to lose it to, because I have had that one since about 2013, so it has stood its time. It's the main cardiac climb on Cannock Chase on Follow the Dog, yeah. And it was only like in the last month or two that Lewis had taken it. So I was like, okay. So when I'm next up there, I'm taking the turbo trainer, parking up outside, going to do a hero effort and calm down. But in terms of, the Polarised thing, it's interesting to see the distribution within different training methods and methodologies. Obviously you can't keep up high intense all the time. You are going to have to kind of promote it with those steady endurance rides ultimately, and cycling is an aerobic sport. So you do need to encompass that within your training. And it's just ensuring that it's suited to that individual. So you shouldn't just go out with the approach of, okay, this is the training approach I want to do. You need to understand the demands of the event. If they've got lots of 5-minute climbs, you should probably do some 5-minute efforts to understand that. If there's 6 5-minute efforts in whatever event you're going to do, maybe build up your efforts so you can repeat those efforts as well. So it's just making the training. Again, absolutely, it's context. It's just understanding the demands of the event, the individual, what their physiology is, where they currently are, what they need to be, and then work towards that. And whatever method seems to work with that individual, you go for it.
Sounds really good to me, rather than just following some off-the-shelf plan that may or may not be working, which...
Yeah, exactly. You have that experience of the person that's created that plan for you. Like ours are all fully bespoke, designed for those individuals. It's then you can put in the appropriate kind of overload and progression within those sessions. So whether you do power builds, duration builds, you make it appropriate for that individual. Some people might not be able to handle much of an increase every week, but they can handle a bit more every other week. So you take that into account as well, rather than, because your response will be different to my response and the next person's response will be different. So it's about understanding those signals and learning from that, and then adapting the training appropriately.
Oh, fantastic. Right, so what have I got? Two more questions for you. So this is obviously been influenced by what we've seen on the TV. So we've seen this new generation of World Tour cyclists come through. particularly Matthew van der Poel, Wout van Aert. You've got Alaphilippe, world champion, amazing. But I'm just thinking about, and then we've got Roglic and Pogacar, Rog and Pog.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got these people. Everybody's. I love the correlation and causation thing. They've all at one point in their life done cyclocross. So cyclocross is now the future for training, but which it might be. Which it might be.
Well, I mean, I am biased in that fact, aren't I? Really, a little bit.
That's right. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. And you've represented Great Britain, so it obviously worked. So I was thinking. So these guys seem to be, they seem to be insanely good. We've just seen, stages of a stage race, or a stage of a stage race, sorry, where they climbed 2 minutes or something faster than Froome ever climbed, and all that sort of stuff. So what do we know about their training that just a normal cyclist can take away? Is there anything, or is it just these are just people who are complete outliers?
So obviously we have to take into account genetics. We can't choose our parents. They are what they are, and that will play a big role. But obviously, as sports science has developed, considerably over the last 20 years, the understanding of physiology, the integration of sports scientists within world tour teams, access to universities, lab testing, a lot of that will make a difference of understanding their physiology to get the most out of them. It's only been the last 10, 15 years that power meters now are pretty much accessible to everyone. You can pick them up for about £250. I remember as a junior, they were still around about £1,000. I think I paid nearly £900 for my first power meter. Wow. And, there wasn't a huge amount of information around that. And that's really started to dive in the physiology side of things now, and our understanding of that, even from a fueling perspective is now as well. Understanding within obviously work by James Morton at Liverpool, John Moores have come a lot out. Carbohydrate supplementation, Aski Ekinjup's coming out a lot with, the multidextrin fructose and 2-to-1 ratios. Obviously the development of Morton along the 2-hour Nike project. A lot of that ultimately stems to maximize performance as much as we can. And that taken into practice will help the sport and it'll help maximize that individual. And so a lot of what you can really take from that is if you can understand your physiology and train appropriately for that and take a step backwards rather than just trying to go with the latest trends, the fads, all these other gadgets. There's no shortcuts. You do need to commit your time. And these guys are full-time athletes, we have to forget. They don't have to worry about sorting their dinner out, the food, anything like that. When they're on training camps, they're looked after. They can recover. We've all got jobs. We enjoy our training time. We've got to have other things in life. But, they can recover so much better, and they'll look at every single little thing that they can do. So it's not trying to take, all these gadgets and, this gadget will give me this X percent. It's just look at the basics first. Your training and your recovery. Sleep is often neglected so much. People don't fuel for their sessions often as well. So if you start to look at those kind of basic areas, get the basics right first, and then go from there. And again, these guys do have unique physiology and they are outstanding riders, which makes for some fantastic bike race. And I must admit, it's been absolutely fantastic. So it's all that side of things will make a big difference. And we'll see it in different waves. We're coming riders, technology will help develop performance. Obviously, understanding live CDA now is accessible, wind tunnel testing, bike aerodynamics, technology development, fabric technology development, optimized fueling strategies. There's so much more around than there was 20 years ago. It's not saying that they're training any harder. They might just be training more specifically because we have these tools to understand it. Blood lactate analysis, VO2 max. It's a data-rich sport now. You can measure pretty much anything you want.
That's true. That's true. There's more stuff coming out for measuring. Somebody told me about something yesterday, and I even forget where it was. It's every day we get emails coming here about pitching some device, and it was something that just analyzes just about every metric in your body during the day. Whether it does it accurately or not is another subject. But you think, bloody hell, there's that ring in there what Armstrong wears now that tells him all about his sleep and all that sort of stuff.
Aura,
yeah,
if I'm pronouncing it right. Yeah, there's things like that. Obviously, heart rate variability. You've got the Whoop band. There's a new product in the market, Super Sapiens, which will do your blood glucose. But just because you can measure something doesn't necessarily mean you should. And a lot of the time, if you can't give context to that information and take away something practical from it, so if you can't change your behavior or understand yourself better with it, it might actually data blind you, and you can restrict yourself because of that data. You might go, well, my watch is telling me on a bad day. But if you're feeling okay, are you going to listen to that watch, or are you going to listen to yourself? You can go far with bad legs and a good head than you can with, a bad head and good legs. And then sometimes we can become blinded with data, and having access to a coach can sometimes take that stress away from you. And, you just tell, am I going well? I think, yeah, to put it so simply.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's to have the understanding of that data. Just because there's technology out there doesn't necessarily mean it's correct. Doesn't necessarily mean it's measuring what it's trying to measure. There is a lot of, I'm seeing it more and more these days, a lot of marketing out there trying to sell the sports science side of things. It's the best metric out there. It's going to help you so much. And sometimes, it is just simply marketing, and not to be taken away by it and go, this is the next, because there's no shortcut. Cycling, you have to commit time and work at it. There's no overnight session, there's no magic bullet. It takes time and commitment and progression. But once you understand that process and see the results from that process, you can almost then fall in love with it. And once a client's been with us kind of like 6-7 weeks, and they start to get into the rhythm of it, seeing the progression, seeing what the coach is reporting, this is responding. 2 weeks ago, your heart rate was 10 beats higher. Now for the same power, it's 10 beats lower. It's having someone like that to report back to you, and you can go understand and just crack on with your life. It takes all that stress away from you, rather than going, okay, what's my heart rate variability? What's my weight? What's my diet doing? And sometimes you become too stressed about all that data that's out there at the minute, which can almost then be debilitating.
Yeah, it's very, very wise. And it's funny, really. We see a lot of people that we might have particularly, where I live here, everybody going to the cycling camp when they can do. And, you'll see a lot of people on 13-grand bikes that might only do 3 hours training a week. And I often think, if they had a 5-grand bike and spent the time on coaching and training, they'd be dropping people on the ride rather than clinging on.
Yeah.
And they'd probably have a greater satisfaction about riding rather than, the satisfaction of just seeing a lovely bike leaning up the wall at the calf.
Absolutely. And, there's nothing wrong with having a nice bike, but that investment, let's say, is a one-time deal. It's going to make you fast once. Whereas actually, if you invest in yourself, you'll get better over time, again and again and again, and it's continuously rewarding. Obviously, with coaching, it's not something tangible. Obviously, a bike you can touch, you can clean, you can watch, you can Instagram, you can do whatever you want. With coaching, obviously, you can't touch it, you can only feel it, and you can show others it as well. And it's, everyone likes being faster than their mate, everyone likes being stronger. And if people did invest the same amount of time into their coaching and getting a coach, I do feel a lot of people, pretty much everyone, it helps unlock the potential that's in you. And it's, people are rushed to go too hard on their training sessions, which an often thing someone gets wrong is they've got that no pain no gain mentality of just, I need to destroy myself. And my dad's probably guilty of that. And when he tells me what he's doing, I'm like, Dad, I do this for a living. I might know what I'm talking about. And he goes, oh yeah, okay, I'll give it. Sometimes I have someone else, at work, just check over my things as well, because I can get a bit carried away in my own stuff ultimately, and I have to take a step backwards and remind myself, actually, no, back down. It's just about being consistent week on week. I injured myself back in October after a bikepacking trip we did, the King Alfred's Way. So it was about 300k around here, basically. And I basically destroyed my knee through all sorts of different ways. I think I got through about 3 physios trying to look at it and sort it out. And I was just taking about 3 months off with Putin. So my fitness had gone way down. I think we did a bit of an ECG health stress test at uni, where my girlfriend is, and I think I maxed out at like 270 watts. So, and my best map test is about 460. So
Wow.
a big difference. But 3 months off, expect detraining after 3-4 weeks anyway. But I was just consistent with my training, and just building it up, going from like 3 10-minute efforts, all the way up to 230s now, and then tapping back out 300 watts, relatively comfortably. And it's just been consistent, not rushing back into training, keeping my easy rides easy. And it's just those simple things which sometimes we can get a bit too lost in. Yeah, we search for PBs every single session, whereas that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking, as a coach, I'm looking for consistency. If you can push a little bit more on the last effort, that's cool. But some people, when riders come to me and we start the whole training process through TrainSharp, we explain all this, kind of go through it. And I used to do it, 4 or 5 minute efforts, let's say, above threshold, And you go off and you go, oh, I've actually not done a 5-minute test in a while. I'm just going to go flat out for the first 5 minutes. It's like, yeah, cool. But then your next 3 efforts are way under target and it's a struggle. You come home, you go, well, that was a terrible session because I didn't get through it. It was actually, if you just did 5, you can 4 or 5 consistent efforts, you will spend far more time being productive and you'll improve. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
People just get carried away and just go smash, smash, smash. It's just like, no, we set ranges for a particular reason. So on a good day, you can work towards the top end. If you're feeling a bit, a bit tired, that the day's caught up with you, you aim for the lower end of the target. There's no problem with hitting the lower end of a power target. That's why the ranges, you've got biological variability, you've got error within your power meter, and some days you just might not be feeling it. But if you hit the lower end, absolutely fine. I'd much rather do that than hit the top end of the target and just die a miserable death, because you put yourself in a bigger hole the next day, and that's when you just get into that cycle of not completing sessions. Whereas actually talking to the coach, just hit the lower end, and there you go. It's that communication with the athlete.
That's great advice. Great advice. So last question then.
Go
so
for
if
it.
you were to start all over again, what's the one thing you wish you'd known about training?
Training. That's to be honest, I'm continuously learning, so that answer will probably change. It'd be more time during my university times where I had so much more time. I probably wish I did more volume, with having that time and that balance and being able to take a little bit more of a, I suppose as you get older, you get a little bit wiser. Probably not the best thing coming from a 26-year-old, but I can take that step back in my training and maybe been a little bit more specific, especially in my under 23 days, and yeah, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but now I can give that experience back to the athletes that I've worked with, especially because I look after the junior team in our TrainSharp Inspire Talent program, which is all about trying to put riders in the best possible position to get professional contract. So allowing them to progress through the sport and their dreams, and I can share that information that I've been through as well. So not only can I put my sports physiology hat on, I can put my coaching hat on, and I can empathize with that athlete as well. I've been in their position. I've traveled around, Europe racing, cyclocross, mountain biking, racing road in Belgium. I can share that experience to ultimately try and get the absolute most out of those riders, whether it's male riders, female riders. It's that's what I love about my job. I can talk to these athletes and have that connection with them as well. And they understand, they trust, and they see where I've been as well. And I think it's having that perfect blend of sports science and racing experience, because both elements bring strong points. Obviously, you've got coaches that have just got the coaching experience, you've got coaches that just got the sports science, but I think having the perfect blend of the two does give that kind of that strong point, really, I feel. I mean, I am biased in that fact, but it allows you to, like I said, emphasize with that athlete. I can't speak tonight; it's late.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, it's funny. I spend my day on Zoom nowadays. It's like you get to a point where it's like, I can't speak anymore. No, that's really good. Funny enough, I was talking to a guy. He does this a charity thing about the where they go ahead of the Giro.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds absolutely amazing, and they do all the stages of the Giro, for charity beforehand, and they do pretty serious and all that sort of stuff. And I said, what's the key thing that people you've picked up that people get wrong when they do these sort of like stage events? He said it's nothing in the training, it's nothing in what they do during the day when they're on the bike. It's what they do when they go back to the hotel. He said that ruins people's event. I thought, oh, what do you mean? He said, oh, just some people are still racing around, they're diving in the pool, they're playing on PlayStation, stressing themselves out. They forget to wash the kit. They get boils. It's like all that sort of stuff. Yeah. Never thought about it.
Yeah, and we've come across it quite a bit. People are very all for putting all that energy into their training. And let's say for a normal person, let's say even if you did 14 hours a week, that's 2 hours a day on average. There's still 22 hours in the day. What you do in those 22 hours will impact on how you feel and how you progress within your training. And, what else do we do for a large proportion of that day normally? We sleep. And that's often an area which many riders neglect. Sleep is where you recover. And that is the holy grail of improving your training, your performance within your training is recovery. So if you just put just as much energy into all those other aspects, and that you can help recover, timing your nutrition, just stretching a little bit of mobility work, get a good night's sleep, get good sleep quality, they can make a world of difference. Big world of difference.
Advice. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Alex,
get the basic right. If I could finish with one thing, get the basics right and then go from there.
And so how do people get in touch with you and get their training sorted out?
So they can drop me an email at my work, alex@trainsharp.co.uk. I've got my Twitter handle, Alex_Welburn. Or even, have a quick search on Google. You'll find multiple ways to get hold of me.
Fantastic.
So if anyone wants any training tips, advice, just drop me an email and we can see how we can help you today.
Super. Thank you very much.
No, my absolute pleasure.